To the new lecture of our series on data mining and data warehousing. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about collective outliers and the challenges faced in finding outliers in high-dimensional data. So first, we'll talk about mining contextual outliers and how to transform it into conventional outlier detection. So if the context can be clearly identified, transform it to conventional outlier detection. For that, what we need to do is we need to identify the context of the object using the contextual attributes. Then we need to calculate the outlier score for the object into the in the context using a conventional outlier detection method. So it is basically a two-step process in which firstly we need to identify the context of object using our contextual attributes, and then we need to calculate the outlier score the same as we did in our previous methods. Taking an example of that, let's detect outlier customers in the context of customer groups. First, our contextual attributes are basically age group, postal code, and there are some behavioral attributes such as number of transactions per year and annual total transaction amount. So our first step is to locate the contextual customers context or contextual attributes and then compare the customer with other customer in the same group and use a conventional outlier detection method. So if the context contains very few customers, then generalized context example of that is learn a mixture model U on the contextual attribute and another mixture model V on the data of the behavior attributes. Then we need to map U and V, that is the probability that a data object O belonging to customer U on the contextual attribute is generated by the cluster Vi on the behavioral attribute, and we need to find the outlier score. And depending on the outlier score, we need to identify whether an object is an outlier or it is a normal data object. Now we are going to talk about modeling normal behavior with respect to context. What usually happens is in some applications one cannot clearly partition the data into context. So our contextual attribute cannot be partitioned. That is, if a customer suddenly purchased a product that is unrelated to those she recently browsed, it is clear that how many products browsed earlier should be considered as the context. Because if she bought a product, then it should be related somehow to the product she purchased. So here the behavior is not clear. So what we need to do is we need to model the normal behavior with respect to some context. For that we require using a training dataset, train a model that predicts the expected behavior attributes with respect to the contextual attribute values, and an object is a contextual outlier if its behavior attribute values significantly deviates from the value predicted by the model. So here also we are trying to focus on building the model, and based on the outcome of model deciding whether an object is an outlier or not. So using a predictive model that links the context and behavior, these methods what really do is avoid the explicit identification of specific contents. And the method here deployed is a number of classification and prediction techniques can be used to build such models such as regression, Markov model and finite state automata. So these models can be used for building our predictive model, which can be used for prediction, and can also be used for building the classification model. Now we are going to discuss mining collective outliers on set of structured objects. So collective outliers, if object as a group deviates significantly from the entire set, then we call it collective outliers. What we need to examine is we need to examine the structure of the data set, that is the relationship between multiple data objects. And what important here is each of these structure is inherent to its respective type of data. That is for temporal data, by temporal data we mean the time series and sequences. What we do is we explore the structure formed by time which occur in segment of the time series or subsequences, whereas for spatial data we try to explore the local areas, and for graph and network data what we build is we try to build out the subgraphs and how actually it works. That is the difference from the contextual outlier detection, that is the structure are often not explicitly defined and we need to discover as part of outlier detection process. Then talking about collective outlier detection method basically falls into two categories. First, our method is to reduce the problem to conventional outlier detection. For that we need to identify structure units and treat each structure unit, that is subsequence, time series segment, local area or graph, as a data object and extract features. So first we need to create structures and each structure unit should depict some attributes. Basically what we are trying to do is taking out the feature. Then what we can do is we then outlier detection on the set of structured object constructed as using abstracted features is identified. Now we are going to discuss direct modeling on the expected behavior of structured unit. So what we here do is we model the expected behavior of structure unit directly, which can be done. Then taking an example of detecting collective outlier in online social network of customers, what we do is firstly we treat each possible subgraph of the network as a structure unit, and second for collective outlier, an outlier subgraph in the social network, basically small subgraphs that are of very low frequency and large graphs that are of surprisingly frequent. Taking another example, detect outlier collective in nature in temporal sequences. So what here we do is we could have built a learn and build a Markov model from the sequence, and a subsequence then can be declared as collective outlier if it significantly deviates from the model. So if you can understand that the basic thing is that what we are looking forward for is we are looking forward for deviation as suggested by the definition of our outlier detection. And collective outlier detection is subtle due to the challenges of exploring the structures and data, and the exploration typically uses heuristics and thus may be application dependent and often requiring the domain knowledge for that. Secondly, the computation cost is often high due to sophisticated mining process because it is not simpler in nature as compared to normal outlier detection processes. They involve complex computation and basically require too much cost for handling such computations. Now let's talk about the challenges of outlier detection in high dimensional data. First is interpretation of outliers. So if we detect some outlier, detecting outlier without saying why they are outlier is not very useful in high dimension due to many features are involved in a high dimensional dataset. So taking an example that which subspaces that manifest the outlier or an assessment regarding the outlierness of the object. So We can map the data into high dimensions, but identifying which dimensions are required, which are not required, this object is an outlier, why it is an outlier, why it should be an outlier, and this there is some other object which is not detected as outlier, why it has not been detected as an outlier. Many such questions comes. So the thing with high dimension is data sparsity, which is the data in high dimensional space is often sparse and the distance between objects becomes heavily dominated by the noise as the dimension increases. Secondly, there is data subspecies, which is adaptive to the subspecies, signifying the outlier and capturing the local behavior of data. Further, the thing is the in high dimension the scalable aspect with respect to dimensionality, that is the number of spaces usually increases exponentially. So all these becomes a problem in our outlier detection process and thus becomes a challenge for outlier detection in high dimensional data. With this we come to end of our this lecture. Keep studying, focus and stay safe from COVID-19. Till then, take care. And in case of any query, please feel free to contact me at utsav@gwca.ac.in. Thank you for your time and support.